They capture our imagination and they fill our childhood memories. They are the living treasures of our planet. But across the globe, these beloved creatures are vanishing, victims of an invasion so subtle that most of us never notice it happening. This isn't science fiction, it's happening right now, as invasive ant species, fueled by human activity, homogenize our planet's biodiversity and erase boundaries that shaped life for millions of years. To understand what we're losing, we need to grasp the incredible story of ants. For nearly 150 million years, these social insects have been shaping Earth's ecosystems. In tropical forests, ants make up approximately a quarter of all animal biomass, more than all vertebrates combined. Their colonies function as superorganisms with millions of individuals working as one. Over evolutionary time, ants have become ecosystem engineers, controlling energy flows through predation on other species, creating protected spaces for animals that they farm, hosting symbiotic species, decomposition and soil mixing, seed dispersal and pollination, and serving as food for specialized predators. This power didn't happen overnight. The fossil record shows ants only achieved their current ecological dominance in the past 40 to 60 million years. Their rise reshaped terrestrial ecosystems, splitting them into ant-dominated zones and peripheral pockets where other species evolved strategies to either coexist with ants or avoid them altogether. The result? Distinct biogeographic regions with unique ant communities that evolved in isolation from one another, separated by oceans, mountain ranges, and climatic zones. These boundaries were discovered by the naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace, who jointly published The Theory of Evolution with Darwin. Wallace identified sharp divisions between animal communities on neighboring islands in Indonesia, providing him evidence of evolution. The Wallace Line, an invisible boundary running between Bali and Lombok in Indonesia, aligned with a 250-meter deep Lombok Strait, marks where Asian wildlife gives way to Australian species, the result of 120 million years of separate evolution. At least that was true until now. In just 200 years, humans have completely rewritten these ancient patterns. Research from the University of Lausanne reveals how human activity has facilitated the global spread of invasive ants, breaking down biogeographic boundaries that took millions of years to form. The study tracked 309 non-native ant species, hitchhikers, on global trade and tourism, finding they're reshaping the distribution of all 13,774 known ant species. Just 2% of species moving beyond their natural ranges has been enough to redraw Earth's biological map. Among the worst offenders are the Argentine ant, the red imported fire ant, the yellow crazy ant, and the little fire ant. The result? 52% of ant communities worldwide are becoming more similar. Areas below the Tropic of Cancer, including Australia, Africa, and South America, now effectively form a single biogeographic region with increasingly identical ant species. Islands are hit hardest. Their geographic isolation once created evolutionary laboratories, producing unique species found nowhere else. Now, these fragile ecosystems face unprecedented threats as invasive ants arrive with tourists and imported goods. On Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean, the consequences are catastrophic. Yellow crazy ants have decimated the island's iconic red land crabs, overwhelming these charismatic crustaceans with formic acid spray. The loss of these keystone omnivores triggered an ecological cascade. Seedlings grew unchecked, creating dense understory vegetation. Litter decomposition slowed. Giant African land snails invaded, and scale insects exploded in population, leading to canopy dieback and tree death. In the United States, the Texas horned lizard, once abundant across the Southwest, faces regional extinction. These beloved horny toads depend on harvester ants for nearly 70% of their diet. But when invasive fire ants and Argentine ants displace native harvester colonies, the lizards starve. The lizards that once captured the imagination of generations of children are disappearing from huge swaths of their range. In Texas, where they're the official state reptile, populations have declined by more than 30% since 1967. Northern bobwhite quail populations have plummeted by more than 85% across their range as fire ants destroy eggs and attack newly hatched chicks. Gopher tortoises and sea turtles face similar threats to their nests and hatchlings. Even in intact forests, the stakes are enormous. Army ants, with colonies of up to 1 million workers, support over 300 dependent species, from beetles to birds. When forest fragmentation causes army ant colonies to disappear, the entire communities of dependent species vanish also. Flocks of ant-following birds, up to 30 species hunting insects flushed by army ant raids, disappear when their ant partners are lost. Similar specialized bird communities exist in African forests, equally vulnerable to ant declines. Beyond these visible losses lies an invisible extinction crisis. Scientists estimate between 10,000 and 100,000 species have evolved as specialized myrmecophiles, organisms adapted to live within ant colonies. Many show extraordinary adaptations. Caterpillars that mimic ant larvae, crickets that steal chemical signatures, beetles with specialized glands producing appeasement compounds, and remarkable ant-mimicking rove beetles. When native ant diversity collapses, these hyper-specialized organisms have nowhere to go. They represent an unseen dimension of biodiversity loss, species disappearing before we've even discovered them. Research techniques are revealing the true scale of what's at stake. A single hectare of tropical forest may contain over 100 ant species, each with its own suite of dependent organisms. The homogenization of ant communities represents more than just lost species. It's the erasure of millions of years of evolutionary history, complex ecological relationships, and biological innovations we've barely begun to understand. Climate change is also accelerating this crisis. Rising temperatures are allowing invasive tropical ants to expand their ranges into previously inhospitable regions. Fire ants are marching northward as winters warm, bringing their devastating impacts to new ecosystems unprepared for their arrival. Many invasive ant species show superior heat tolerance compared to native species. As heat waves increase in frequency and intensity, these invaders gain competitive advantages. Drought can further tip the balance. Some invasive species, like the Argentine ant, better exploit water resources during dry periods, allowing them to outcompete native species already stressed by changing conditions. Scientists warn of a coming thermal bottleneck, where only the most heat-tolerant species survive. If these happen to be invasive generalists, entire ecosystems could shift toward simplified, homogenized communities dominated by a few winners. The battle isn't lost. Enhanced biosecurity measures at ports and airports can prevent new ant invasions. Detection dogs, specifically trained to find ant queens, have proven remarkably effective, especially in New Zealand. Early detection and rapid response programs have successfully eradicated invasive ants on some islands and in some limited mainland areas. The key is catching populations before they expand beyond control. Protecting and restoring native habitats helps native ant communities resist invasion. Complex, intact ecosystems are more resilient against biological invasions. Citizen science initiatives are also expanding our knowledge of both native and invasive ant distributions. Smartphone apps allow anyone to document and report ant sightings, creating early warning systems for new invasions. For iconic species like horned lizards, conservation breeding programs are building insurance populations, while researchers develop better methods to control invasive ants and restore native harvester ant colonies. The story of ants is the story of Earth's terrestrial ecosystems. For millions of years, they've shaped the world around us, creating niches for countless other species to fill. By understanding and protecting ant biodiversity, we're preserving not just individual species, but entire ecological communities and evolutionary possibilities. Every time you travel, be mindful of what might be hitchhiking with you. Support biosecurity measures, even when they seem inconvenient. And take time to appreciate the complex communities of ants beneath your feet. Ecological architects whose intricate societies have been perfecting sustainable living for millions of years before we arrive. The patterns of life drawn over evolutionary time are being rewritten in the span of a human lifetime. What we do now will determine whether Earth's biodiversity map becomes a monochrome of sameness or remains a vibrant mosaic of difference. The choice is ours. Thanks for joining me on this journey through an ant universe. If you enjoyed this exploration of one of Earth's most successful creatures, Don't forget to like and subscribe for more fascinating stories about our natural world.